Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sandy Fettes. I'm an independent consultant and director of Hogarth Energy Ltd, creating value through wells for my clients by applying my extensive well management and operator experience, delivering safe, reliable performance across wells, HSE and subsurface. I'm delighted to be your host for the OGV Energy Live this afternoon on the theme of well management. OGV Live is an interactive show which aims to deliver news and insights from the energy sector by bringing to life the UK's leading energy industry publication, OGV Energy magazine. And as I said, it's an interactive show, so there's a facility for everybody listening to live, myself, the speakers and all the audience today, to express our sincere condolences to those who have lost loved ones in the tragic accident in Washington, DC today. Our thoughts and prayers are with all family and friends of those affected. And as aviation is a huge part of our business, there's obviously going to be some key lessons in this incident that will be pertinent to the future of everything we do. So this month, we're delighted to invite an array of guests from the world of well management to discuss some of the key topics in this space. Today, we're delighted to be joined by Mark Wilson, HSE and Operations Director at OEUK, Nick Ford, Managing Director at 360 Energy's Wells Division, James Richards, Well Abandonment Director at Well Safe Solutions, Bronson Larkins, Managing Director at Wellvene, Mike Adams, CEO at Elemental Energies, Stephen Canny, Director of P&A at Archer, the well company, and Ian Farrow, Joint Venture Manager for Elemental Energies and Archer. So there's a lot going on in the world at the moment, with energy and wells being very central in the narrative. From drill baby drill on one side of the pond to decommission baby decommission here in the UKCS. With the latest insights, let's welcome Mark Wilson from OEUK, who's going to help us set the scene on the energy and wells landscape and explore the challenges the industry currently faces. Mark.
Sandy, thank you very much, and what a pleasure to be here today, and hello to you all. So my name is Sandy Fettes, it's Mark Wilson. I'm HSE Operations Director at an organisation called Offshore Energies UK. I've been with that organisation for 3 years now. Actually, I arrived the day that they retitled from OGUK, so Oil and Gas UK, to Offshore Energies UK back in the 14th of February 3 years ago. But a little bit more about that sort of wider energy landscape mix shortly. Just a little bit about myself, just so you understand the individual who's on screen in front of you. So I've spent 3 years at OEUK, as I mentioned. I've spent a further 11 years in the industry working for organisations such as Enquest and ConocoPhillips. And prior to that, I had 24 years in what I lovingly call my first career in the British Army as a mechanic. So very much bringing my first year skills, I hope, into the second year. And I hope that this overview today will provide you some insights that you may find useful over the coming year as we look at some of the challenges and indeed the opportunities that we've got. I'm going to keep it purposely short because there's some questions that we can discuss. There's clearly something in the news of relevance today that I'll be able to add some value to, I hope, in terms of one of the rulings of the Court of Session in Edinburgh recently. So if you could move me on one more slide, please, team, that would be great. So I wanted to just provide a high-level introduction to energy production. And this slide maps out production from 2000 out to 2030. And you may have seen similar slides before. We lovingly call this our purple slide, where you can see at the bottom there, the deep blue, deep purple color is oil, the light gray is gas. And you can see from 2004, where that black line sort of going across the horizontal plane shows the actual UK's demand. So the color graphs show the actual supply that we've had. The black line shows the demand. So therefore you can presume that the white piece under the black line, the solid and the dotted line, is imports, and more about that in a moment. But as you can see, from 2004, we've been a net importer of energy and continue to be a net importer of energy. In fact, in 2003, the latest reports tell us that we imported 40.8% of our energy, which is an increase of 3.8% the year before. So we're not shifting the needle in terms of that homegrown energy production making a dent in our own imports as well. But you can see from this picture here, this graph, that there is still a role for oil and gas, albeit in the energy mix, albeit our own supply of that oil and gas is in decline in many areas, as you'll be well aware. However, I would stress here that the Climate Change Committee, and you can see in the third bullet point down there, they predict that the UK's oil and gas demand for out to 2050 is in the region of 15 billion barrels of oil and gas equivalent, oil equivalent. So 15 billion barrels. At present, we estimate that there's less than 4 billion in play, but there's a further 4 billion that we should be looking to maximize potential. And of course, a lot of those on the call today have got a role in terms of the well management and the exploration production aspect of maximizing that. So just to reiterate some of those points, 15 billion barrels of oil equivalent out to 2050 is the predicted demand for the UK. 4 billion or less than 4 billion currently in play out to 2030. So therefore, there is a deficit, which is an import deficit. And we want to make sure that we can reduce that reliance on imports as much as possible. And there's many reasons for why we want to do that. One is around making sure that we secure and keep the 200,000 indirect and direct jobs that are actively employed within the oil and gas industry. There's a skills aspect within that as well. There's clearly ensuring that we sustain the world-class supply chain. But with all of this, there's a matter as well of making sure that we maintain that environmental responsibility and that we recognize that the likes of liquid natural gas as an import is 4 times higher than the UK's current oil and gas produced resources. So we just need to recognize that there's a role there from a people, a skills, a supply chain, and also an environment perspective. And then finally, there's the energy security piece. We've got it on our doorstep. Why wouldn't we maximize the potential to sort of make sure we can bring it in? And as we go forward, we will see that future projects will, in many cases, be world leading in their emission footprint as well. So lots of sort of to take in there, but the key aspect as well is that today, 75% of our energy needs are met by oil and gas. So when somebody says to me, for instance, or you, what's the role that oil and gas has in our energy mix, it's still very much apparent. It's still very much there. And some more data points, if you want your data points, I'm conscious the audience may be inclined to some of that technical data, but it's in the region. So the calculations are that from I think 2022, there's 30 million homes in the UK. Of those 30 million homes, 24 million are currently powered by gas heating systems. 1.5 million are powered by oil systems, many of those in Scotland, of course. So 30 million homes still, so in the UK, with 24 million and 1.5 million, still reliant on oil and gas. So there's a role there as well. And then the final data point I like to sort of bring in just from an interest factor is that in the UK, there's 34 million vehicles on the road. Of those 34 million, 32 million are still powered by petrol and diesel. So very much a role for oil and gas. I'm sure you all get that on the call, but wanted to sort of reflect that in some of those data points in there as well. So we are going to be a net energy importer, but we've got the opportunity to reduce that net energy import figure by maximizing not just the renewables. We've got to recognize that this is an energy transition and the role of oil and gas in underpinning that transition and making sure that we work together and bring those forward as well. So although the production's falling, there is opportunity ahead of us, and we need to recognize that diversification is in there as well. So if you could move me on any other slide, please, and then just one more. Oh, no, we got to the end one. There we go. And then I just wanted to recognize as well the ever-changing landscape of the Wells environment. And I'm sure that you are actively involved in many of these areas, but there's plenty of opportunity there. I mean, we might not be seeing it from that sort of exploration development perspective. As you can see on the graph there, it has been driven down, but there is other opportunities in other areas. Those opportunities, as we now know, are sort of decommissioning, and those opportunities also exist in future areas such as geothermal, and we've been active in those spaces, engaged with the National Geothermal Centre, for instance, but recognizing that there has been a significant fall. I was just looking at some data points over lunch that we've been reporting on, and last year, there was 42 well spuds that took place. So 42 versus 5 years ago where there was 141. So when you recognize that decline in activity, and then many of you on the call will be sort of very much living and breathing that each day. But there is an opportunity through Wells P&A, and our annual report outlines the value add that Wells decommissioning can bring to the UK economy from a cost perspective, but also from an activity perspective. And there's an estimated 21 billion spend in decommissioning over the next 10 years, of which 50% of that is directly related to Wells activity. So hence the reason you see that blue on the right-hand side there to Wells P&A activity. And of course, we are constantly looking and striving to see how we can streamline and bring that efficiency forward. Underpinned, though, by everything we do is that focus on our license to operate, that sort of ensuring that we recognize that safe, reliable operations underpinned again by that environmental responsibility are important areas. So a very quick introduction there in terms of that energy landscape, the energy transition, and the role of oil and gas within that energy transition to support and protect people and skills, supply chain, energy security, and indeed play a positive contribution to the environment, and of course the ever-evolving Wells landscape that we live and breathe and work within as well. I'm going to pause there because I know, conscious Sandy, you've got some questions you'd like to bring into the discussion as well, and very much sort of recognise the nature of this event in terms of it being around the discussion as well. And hopefully you found that interesting as an introduction to get you out the blocks.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Mark. Some great insights there. So let's kick off with the hot news of today, which is the Court of Session providing a ruling. Tell me a little bit more about that, Mark, and what's your and OEUK's thoughts on what they've done, and maybe actually explain to the audience what today's announcement was, please.
Yeah, absolutely, Sandy. And I've had a few interviews on this one already, so it's quite a current topic, and I apologise up front for if any of embarrassing myself maybe in media as I have done, but you'll maybe see me later on the screen and lots of that. But yeah, so back to the serious business though. So Court of Session in Edinburgh has ruled and made the ruling today that two North Sea oil and gas projects, Jackdaw and Rosebank, can continue through the development phase of their project life cycle. However, they have to resubmit an environmental impact assessment, and that resubmission of the environmental impact assessment has got to be done in accordance with what is coming in relation to the revision to the environmental impact assessment process. So for those of you that are not aware, in June 2024, there was a ruling called the Finch ruling, which basically took into account a production opportunity, onshore production opportunity, or development production opportunity, that didn't factor in scope 3 or end use oil and gas emissions. So the ruling basically outlines that the projects can continue through the development phase. However, to move to the production phase, they will have to resubmit an environmental impact assessment to get a new consent, and do that in accordance with the EIA revised process. So there was a consultation that was launched at the end of October, and industry submitted comments by the 8th of January. And that consultation was on the EIA supplementary guidance, so the changes to the actual, the process. And we're expecting the final change to the process to be reported back to industry by spring of 2025. So watch this space in that one. What we've asked those is it to be done at pace, although recognising legal compliance and those factors as well.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I was going to ask about the timing of the guidance, because I think it's absolutely urgent now when you look at the gap between what we're producing and what we're consuming, and the Finch agreement. On one hand, you might think that the Finch agreement puts advantageous conditions on the international sellers of product into the UK market, because my understanding is that they don't have to deal with and look at end use emissions, but new licenses here are going to have to look at that. What's your view on that?
So yeah, I mean, we're pretty much world leading in this space from a regulatory perspective in terms of bringing in the Finch ruling finding as well. I mean, in the future, such aspects as carbon border adjustment mechanism would see a balance in maybe some disparity that's coming through, and making sure that CBAM, as it's called, recognises where higher emissions have been borne by producers elsewhere. But we've got to be leading in that area. I mean, one of the things we've been very much stressing is our environmental responsibility that we as an industry in the UK pride ourselves on, and that we're, if we look at things like our net zero commitments, we've seen a 28% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from offshore oil and gas production since 2018. We was the first industry to formally sign up to net zero targets. So we've got to be proud of what we're doing, but recognise that government regulators are looking for robustness and also the ability to withstand scrutiny, whether from a wide range of stakeholders in what we're doing as an industry. So we need to continue to engage on this consultation, as well as there is some other very important consultations that are about to launch that we've all got to prepare ourselves for.
Yeah, so I hear Dave Whitehouse on social media and LinkedIn quite a lot talking about these consultations. One specifically really is about the government consultation on issuing of new licenses. So can you tell us a bit more about that? And really for the audience today, how can we get involved? How can we contribute? How can we make a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the government manifesto commitment was around no new licenses for no new fields. Stress the word new in both of those, like new licenses and no new fields. And the consultation was due to launch at the end of October 2024. It's since been delayed, and we're anticipating that consultation to launch shortly. Now, that shortly could be within the next week, 2 weeks. And we anticipate that consultation now being widening to include aspects of the future of the North Sea. Some of those could be decommissioning. It will almost certainly be licensing. What we recognise is we need to ensure that we get that expertise to comment on what could be a wide-ranging consultation. So those on the call, you'll have your expertise in wells, future license opportunities. You'll have thoughts on what a licensing regime could look like, and we want contribution. But the other thing we're looking for as well is that organisations and respond to the consultation as well from their own organisation. So OEUK will put in an industry response, and we'll engage with our members to do that. But also organisations can put in their own response, particularly around licensing. But the key thing is, and we found this through the conversations we had in 2024 around fiscal, the key thing is where we can is to speak with a unified voice, because it can get very confusing if we go to government and we're asking for different things. Where we can, we need to be clear about what we're asking for. Okay,
thanks, Matt. We saw in your graphs the decline in production in UKCS, and I think it's quite clear in the media that the tax intake from UKCS is on the decline, and very likely at a higher pace than predicted by the government when they increased the EPL last year. Now, in my view, a healthy oil and gas industry here is an absolute prerequisite for a healthy decommissioning industry, so we can pay our dues and do the work that has been committed to be done in a timely manner. So where are we? Because where's your view on that? Because I think we're you know, I think we're partially over the cliff that was talked about in the lead up last year to that decision. How can we arrest that cliff, and how can we get back to a really good balance which unlocks the decommissioning work?
So part of it, yeah, it's an interesting question, an interesting one there. Is obviously one is around the fiscal regime, and we have got, again, another consultation about to launch about the future of the fiscal regime. So one is to get involved with that aspect, but the other one, from a decommissioning perspective, is to recognise and feed into where the opportunities exist into the likes of OEUK, into the likes of the DART and the Decommission and Repurpose Task Force, that where there's opportunities for taking forward industry synergies, industry opportunities to streamline. But I am aware that the future consultation that focuses on the North Sea will have a decommissioning element in there that will look at those opportunities. So be really keen to ensure that we've got that industry voice, that industry alignment in those opportunities going forward, and recognizing, you know, we do need to unlock. But what are the keys to unlocking? What are the opportunities unlock? Is it vessel sharing? Is it use of greater technology, etc.? And just bringing those together, and also with many on the call, and that's what today's great about, is being able to share the opportunities on well management and well integrity, and being able to, you know, there'll be something today that somebody's maybe thinking is a problem or an opportunity, a threat that they've got, and the opportunity is already there, is already on the table that we just didn't know about.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So a couple of questions. I know we're just about out of time, but what are the focus areas that OEUK have on wells management in terms of production, adding well interventions and decommissioning at present?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And Keith Wise and Ricky Thompson look after a number of the wells and decommission areas, and by all means do reach out to those as well. But yeah, they're looking at updating a number of guidelines in 2025. We've just actually launched our first wind decommissioning guidelines, which was something to move us further into that offshore energies landscape as well. But they're looking at an update to the well life cycle integrity guidelines. There's an update to well decommissioning for carbon, CO2 storage guidelines, a really important area as we go forward into that carbon capture and storage, and also guidelines on competency for wells personnel. And then new guidelines coming out around well life cycle integrity guidelines for geothermal, carbon capture and storage, and rig considerations for carbon capture and storage as well. So really mixing it up in terms of the energy landscape, as I go back to my first slide, recognizing oil and gas, the pivotal role it plays, but recognize it's an energy transition. And we want to be able to support that fair and prosperous energy transition.
Okay, that's great, Mark. Just like to say hi to a few of the audience. We've got Kirsty Langan, who's said there's a great lineup. So thanks, Kirsty, for volunteering me to host today. Payment Danishvar, good afternoon. Maybe you could tell us where you're from and where you're dialing in from. And we've got a question from Andrew Critson. I don't know if it's quite a long question, but we'll just summarise it at the end. It talks about, go back to where we started on Jackdaw and Rosebank, and what happens if, there's millions of invested. The EIA, two things could happen. The environmental impact assessment guidelines are onerous, or the license is rejected because of that. What then happens?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I wouldn't necessarily want to comment on behalf of Shell and Equinor and Ithaca, of course, but I mean, if you read the ruling, and we've had a chance to absorb some of the contents in there, it's very clear about the commercial aspects. I'm not here to comment on commercial aspects. Are carried at risk of the developer within that as well. But of course, the key thing is that we are working towards as an industry is that the revised process is, one, as I'd mentioned, is legally compliant, is robust, of course, but it provides certainty and clarity of the process. I mean, we all need to be able to comply with the revised process, but it needs to be a process that moves the industry forward. And we're going to have some landmark cases coming along quite quickly that will test that process. And so hence the reason I know the stakeholders involved are ensuring that it's a process that provides clarity, certainty, rigor, but we need to be doing it with pace as well. Great.
Thank you very much, Mark, for your fantastic insights and discussion to kick this off and set the scene. And thanks to the audience for interacting here and asking a few questions. So Superb. And thanks, Mark. Take care. All right. So let's move on to In the Spotlight session. So I'd like to introduce our participants here today. So I'd like to introduce Nick Ford of 360 Energy Wells.
Good afternoon, Sandy.
Would you like to, is there anything you'd like to give a wee chat about, Nick?
Yep, thanks very much, Sandy. Yeah, I'm the Managing Director of the UK Wells business for 360 Energy, and hopefully everyone's heard who 360 are, but in case you're not aware, we're an integrated asset lifecycle company and providing energy and technology solutions across the oil and gas and energy transition as well.
Excellent, thanks, Nick. And Bronson Larkins of Wellvene. Bronson, introduce yourself.
Hi there, Sandy. Yep. Hi all, my name is Bronson Larkins. I'm the Managing Director of Wellvene. I've been in the industry for just a little over 30 years now. And as Nick said, for anyone who's not familiar with Wellvene, we are a design, engineering and manufacturing company. We specialise in well intervention, well integrity, well completions.
Excellent.
So yeah, looking forward to today's session.
Bronson. And James Richards from WellSafe Solutions. James.
Hi, yeah, afternoon all, and thanks, Sandy. Yeah, James Richards from WellSafe Solutions. I'm the Well Abandonment Director at WellSafe. So WellSafe, as I'm sure many of you are aware, is a tier 1 company specialising in well decommissioning. So bringing together the capabilities of the well engineering team focused on decommissioning, and then our kind of P&A specific assets. So we're currently on 3 rigs, 2 semis, and a jackup. Yeah, we've kind of set them up for P&A, with the team supporting them, kind of looking to try and address the challenge for well decommissioning in the North Sea, and overseas, as we've now got an office in Australia and in Malaysia as well. So exciting times.
Thanks, James. So let's kick off. So how does WellSafe Solutions view the decline in the UKCS activity? Is it the more fields that declare cessation of production, the more work there is for WellSafe?
Yeah, we've been asked this a few times. People saying that this news must be good for you. I don't think that's the case. I mean, for starters, there's more than enough wells out there for everyone to kind of get after and keep the whole industry in the North Sea busy for the next few decades. So it's certainly not a case that the more wells that reach COP, and the better. I think you touched on it in the piece when you're in your conversation with Mark around, a healthy supply chain is really important for kind of addressing decommissioning, and that's not just the decommissioning piece. Right now in the UKCS, I think we've seen the lowest number of semi-submersibles in the North Sea active in the last 25 years. So I think there's like 7 currently available. That number's dropped significantly over the last year or so, and it's really in danger if activity doesn't pick up and continuing to drop. And so that's not good for anyone. And it's a mixture of the effects of the EPL on kind of new barrel adding work, but it's also the decommissioning work. So the two go hand in hand. So yeah, I certainly see a healthy supply chain in general addressing the barrel adding opportunities such as Road, Frank and Jackdaw, going hand in hand with addressing the challenge that we've got for decommissioning.
So sticking on people's supply chain, Nick, what you're in the international space at 360 Energy, a huge amount of growth over the last 5-6 years. What do you think inhibits the UKCS from developing homegrown decommissioning supply chain?
Yeah, good question, Sandy. I think it's kind of multi-level, really. I think there's probably a couple of factors at play. One, we've got a draw of what I would call the traditional UK personnel into moving internationally as well. I think the world is very much flatter than it ever was before. So you do have that transition of knowledge and skills that move out of the North Sea. I think probably over the last 5 years, we've probably had a negative narrative against the business that we're in, whether that's in traditional oil and gas space, or whether in the energy transition space, and whether decom fits in the energy transition space. But I think there's probably just a negative sentiment, particularly from graduates coming into our industry. And I think we probably have to work very hard to educate, make people aware of the kind of things that we're doing and the way in which we operate as businesses now. And I think, Mark raised some really good points around the levels of, our social governance and et cetera, and how we run our businesses. And I think that's probably the messages that we've got to get across. So I think there are some challenges for us in developing that. I think, as James said, there's a lot of work out there, but we've got to get it into more usable, manageable programs that we can have sustainable business, because there's no point in me spending a lot of money training up some graduates and then into a project and then have that project end, and then there'll be a gap between that and the next one. One, people don't want to stay around and not work. People are genuinely want to use their skills and expertise, and they'll go elsewhere. And two, as a business, we can't sustain that kind of overhead of having people sat idle. So, for me, it's a multi-level problem that we need to come across in terms of getting that sustainable funnel of work that's coming down to the supply chain. Be a unified approach to getting new graduates and new people into the industry, and telling them that it actually is a really good place to work. It's interesting, it's fun, and we do things in the right ways.
Yeah, I can't agree more, Nick. I have heard some stories of students doing geology in our country, being doing group work, and some of the group members deciding halfway through the group work not to work with a person because they did a summer placement in the oil and gas industry. So it's a real problem out there that I think we need to tackle. Otherwise, we've got many years of work ahead of us in the North Sea. So positivity, communication is all absolutely key. Bronson, I'll bring it to you, because you're a new company, or a fairly new company, trying to bring new technology, and you've got some fantastic technology out there. How do you view the UKCS for adopting and supporting new technology?
Yeah, good question. So for me, we're always learning and striving for continuous improvement in everything that we do when it comes to well interventions. I think that we as an industry, we've got to start to work smarter. We've got to be looking at our well stock and saying, well, how do we more efficiently, more cost effectively, how do we safer and bring safer interventions into everything we do, from well maintenance, well integrity to P&A, etc. And I do genuinely believe that it's critical that the UKCS operators support local companies, support the local supply chain. Yeah, and is that giving us a bit of line of sight, I suppose, into what that potentially looks like for them? Because very much, if you look at Wellvene, we're still a company that operates without long-term contracts. We very much operate on a sort of call-off basis. At best, we're 1 to 2 months sort of forecasts, and that's as far forward as we can look. So without getting that feedback from the operators and really getting an understanding as to what they're doing, it's very challenging for us as a business, and many small businesses like us, to plan accordingly, resource accordingly, and also see what the UK looks like for us, so we can commit to the UKCS or start to sort of bring our attention elsewhere. When you ask about implementation of new technology, I do genuinely believe it's key that operators here support the new technologies. Just recently, Wellvene have implemented 2 new technologies, and the reality is that if we did not have operator support to bring these 2 technologies to the market, our own capex would have probably kicked that down the road by a couple of years. But because we had that operator support, it allowed us to expedite those technologies, and both those operators that have supported that technologies and others are now seeing the benefits of those technologies within their day-to-day operations. So I guess that's my take on that, to be honest with you, Sandy.
To get operator support, relationships are absolutely key, and you must work really hard to develop those to enable that. James, from an international perspective, you've expanded internationally. What key lessons are there from an and this is actually a question for all of you, key lessons that we can, take on board from what you're seeing internationally and implement to make the UKCS a much better place than it is just now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good point because, I guess a lot of conversations we have start with people talking about, internationally how they use the OEUK guidelines, and I suppose you could easily fall into the trap of thinking that we're kind of a little bit ahead of everyone, and they've got things to learn from us. And that may be true in kind of a few kind of examples in a few specific areas for sure, but I think we've got a hell of a lot to learn from overseas as well. I know we're working in some lower cost, kind of lower operating cost basins, and some of the solutions that they've come up with for decommissioning, instead of kind of pulling units and hydraulic workover units, they're using cranes, and the cost savings there are huge. I think a lot of the solutions that we talk about in the North Sea, if you were to take that over there, would just simply be uneconomic. They just wouldn't work. So there's a lot to learn on that side. I think often it's not using the fancy expensive tools and technologies. It's using much more kind of older kind of technology stuff that's tried and tested, and but just using it in kind of more innovative ways. I think the other piece is on the regulatory side, and we've certainly seen in the UK, I guess the NSD have talked quite openly about wanting to kind of use a little bit more of a stick than a carrot in the future. But there are other areas. Australia is a good example where, for various reasons, they've been burned by operators, kind of not effectively being there to exercise their decommissioning liabilities, and that's kind of pushed them towards a much more stringent approach to that kind of regulatory requirements on decommissioning. So they've got their 135 target, which is from COP, 1 year to have the floating infrastructure removed, 3 years for you to have all the wells abandoned, and 5 years to have all the structures and equipment removed. So quite clear guidance on that, and I know that's under challenge at the moment. It would be interesting to see some of the operators in Australia have challenged, saying, are we not better spending our money on barrel adding opportunities rather than decommissioning, which is a familiar story to what we've heard in the North Sea. So it'll be interesting to see which way Australia goes. But if they stick to the guns and if it works, then maybe there's lessons to be learned on the regulatory side of things as well.
Yes, thanks, James. Bronson, you guys in the international market, what do you see overseas?
Yeah, we're similar to James. We've been kind of active down in Australia now for about 4 years, and I think for me with Australia, they're very much, if you're committed to there, they'll commit to you, but they want to see a strong presence in country. Initially we started trying to support from the UK. They like the technologies, but I think there's a saying that kind of goes around. A lot of people go in there, kick the tires, say they can promise the world and they don't show any commitment. So it's just, they're not taken serious. So we are seeing great opportunities down in Australia, there's no doubt about it. Logistically, obviously, it's got its challenges. We're still kind of supplying from the UK to go down there. But what we are also finding now is that because we're growing our company down there, there's more focus on us actually trying to keep everything in country. They want us to manufacture in country. They want us to resource down there. It's like, so we hear a lot when we go around the world of in-country value. We get that. The challenge that we've got as a business here in the UK is we want to support our local supply chain. We want to support all the machine shops, but because we're having to focus elsewhere in other international opportunities that we've got to pursue, because they want to see more commitment from us, it's taken a lot of the work that we're feeding to the supply chain here. So there is a challenge there. There's no doubt about it. We are always looking at the activity levels in each of these regions and try to gauge that. But also as well, I think historically, and as the guys touched on, it used to be, if they've done it in the North Sea, you could almost use that technologies elsewhere. I find now, because of the decline in the UKCS, there's more and more people now working abroad, as in expats, etc. So I do think a lot of these other countries are catching up when it comes to technologies, and the focus is not so much looking back at the UKCS and saying, yeah, that's how we should be doing it, because they're starting to lead the way themselves in these other regions, So there is opportunities for us to learn from these other regions, and I think we're starting to, Wellvene as a business are certainly starting to see that.
Yeah, and Nick, 360 Energy are growing in the international market. I'm not sure where the well management is in that space at the moment, but are you seeing anything from your overseas markets that we can learn from, or is there a reaction to the EPL? The operators reacted quite quickly, or some of them did, to the EPL and changed their strategies very, very quickly. and I've seen a knock-on effect on that into the supply chain. What are you seeing internationally from that perspective, and are you seeing anything that we can learn from?
Yeah, I think James, and Bronson have both brought up good points around. I think as a UKCS, we've got to be receptive to listening to and seeing some of the ways that other people are doing things elsewhere. We're active at the moment in Houston, KL, Middle East, etc., and obviously the North Sea on both sides of the border. And I think there's lots of great lessons learned that's being implemented in, and I think what we've set up is a decom center of excellence, whereby we're sharing that knowledge and sharing those experiences internally around what are we all doing, and making sure that we're sharing those lessons internally, because I think there is a lot of good stuff that's going on in other places. There's a lot of good stuff that's going on in the North Sea as well that we can continue to export, and I think that's probably where I see a lot of our steps being taken. My personal view is I don't really think there is a silver bullet that's going to reduce the overall cost of well decommissioning. I don't think there is a new technology that's going to come into the market that's really going to shave millions of pounds off of each well abandonment. It's just not there. For me, it's that sequential thing. It's about operational control. It's around how we manage operations and how we work and do that with good sound engineering behind it. And I probably would say that being in the well management side, but that's kind of how I see that, and I think the sharing of those lessons, particularly internally, is particularly important, and that's enabled us to differentiate ourselves against some of our competitors in some of the markets.
Yeah.
Cool. I guess, Sandy, if I could just add to that, I think I'm with Nick there. There's not going to be this one groundbreaking technology. It's going to come along and make things a lot more efficient. I think it's it's incremental wins. It's small wins along the way. I also believe as well, we hear a lot about collaboration, and it's something we do practice. But I also think as well, we're not maximising the opportunities for collaboration. Wellvene's had the pleasure of working with certain companies, and I've always found that when we do collaborate, but truly collaborate, really look at that, not for our own self gains, if you will, when we're just open about what is the best technology for the job, for the best end result. And when you go in with that approach, be it 3-4 companies, it's been fantastic outcomes on every occasion that we've had where we went in with that approach. So I don't think we're maximising the opportunities for collaboration as an industry, but I think it's certainly something we should be looking to focus on more going forward.
I'd love to talk about the barriers to that, Bronson, but we'll be here for a long time, I think. So just take a pause. I just want to acknowledge a couple of comments we've got from the audience here. So Payment Danish Fars just complimenting, great capable mentors, a great show, and he's a proud Iranian, but unfortunately in a place where political decisions overseas are, cause a bit of issues and have an effect in his country. And one from Angus Mackay that we might want to take up to share. So one of the biggest challenges we in oil and gas face is a public perception of oil and gas as a fuel to be burnt rather than a critical feedstock material to support the energy transition. Plastics critical for all computer and battery insulation, as well as protective coatings for renewable energy sources, can add to this list. So how do we address it? How I think we talked about it earlier: communication, education, changing the narrative, maybe from some of the protests that are going on at the moment. It's not all about burning oil for power. Any thoughts? James, let's kick off with you on that one.
Yeah, and it's a difficult one because I like all of us probably on the call, we kind of live and breathe in the echo chamber of the oil industry. So I'm seeing it through a very specific lens. It's always interesting when you speak to family. My family live down in Kent. They kind of have a very different view on things and what's put into the media. So yeah, I think we as an industry probably need to make sure we don't fall into that trap of kind of saying, well, can't they see it? It's obvious. And I think we do need to broaden our minds and put our a bit of putting ourselves into other people's shoes and understand where they're coming from with it. At the end of the day, it is a difficult argument to kind of put across, but yeah, the need for these kind of products, oil and gas products, not just energy, isn't going to go away. And so, yeah, I think rather than standing there and saying, looking at these protesters wearing plastic bibs, don't know if they know where those come from. I think I guess that just forces even greater division. I think we do need to probably make more efforts to reach out and try and empathise a little bit more with where they're coming from.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah,
sorry, after you, Nick.
Bronson, I was just going to say, I probably echo your comments, James. I think in a lot of ways the horse has already bolted on that one. I think probably the reality is that we've lost the general public in what we do and how we do that. I think it's, if we are going to re-educate, it's going to be a long process, because I think that the general narrative speaks against it. But I do get my sense is that there is perhaps a softening of kind of people's very staunch anti-oil and gas, and I think there is a touch of that realization coming back in some areas. And I think Mark touched on it earlier around the kind of the ruling that we heard today as well. It's very continue, but you've got to do this over this side and get that through as well. And I do get the feeling that there is maybe a softening from government that seems to be coming as well. We talked about tax revenues. There's nothing like money to focus some people's attention, is there?
Yeah, I think, yeah, absolutely. And you both said the word education. For me, it's absolutely all about education. No one's fighting against the fact they're disagreeing that we need a new energy source and we need a plan for that, but it is a transition, it is a journey, and for me it is about just educating people. I will say, however, I can understand and almost sympathise why people are sort of feeling the way they're feeling when you've got a lot of the operators coming out and saying that they are already moving forward with the transition and we're hitting these targets and this is where we're going to be in 2035, etc., and yet there's almost a wee bit of a U-turn from them. So lead by example, lead from the top, and they get their message clearer, and then that will help educate everyone, and sort of hopefully make that transition a bit smoother and a bit clearer.
And hopefully manage the risks along the way. I think we came very close twice in the last month to shutting down some of the power to parts of our country, because of lack of wind and lack of sunshine in the winter time. So, it's really important that the narrative that everybody in the country hears is truthful and balanced, Yeah. So absolutely balanced narrative is what we need. Carlos Rodriguez, I like the Landman TV series. I haven't watched it myself. It's some valid points regarding the long chain of value. There's a very different perspective in the US. And Southeast Asia, I would say that there's a very different perspective down there as well. The oil and gas energy industry is one that's it's prestigious to go through university, graduate, and work in the industry we're working here. So there seems to be a very different landscape globally to what we're doing.
Yeah, I guess over the last 6 months, I've had an opportunity to be in Abu Dhabi, KL, and Norway, and the conversations are markedly different, and the positivity around what the industry is doing, how it operates, how it works, and going back to our earlier conversation, there's lots of young people getting involved in the business, and that's really, really pleasing to see. And I think probably in future years we will start to see some of those people move into the North Sea if we can't address the upcoming skills shortage that I think we will have.
Yeah, I think it's something that we've certainly seen at WellSafe, where people joining us and I guess positioning ourselves as an energy transition company maybe puts us at a little bit of an advantage. But I think we're all working for energy transition companies now, and I think it's the whole industry is in that process of moving along the energy transition. So I think it's making clear the argument that what we're doing now and late life production and so on is all interlinked, and it all plays a part. If we kind of pull the plug on oil and gas in the North Sea straight away, then it's gonna leave us with a bigger problem, as you say, kind of close to power outages is not what the public want to see at all. So Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's also a safety aspect with it as well, and talking about people and our kind of it's a major accident hazard industry, and trying to keep competent people in jobs is a clear kind of mitigation to that. And as we lose those skills overseas or completely from the industry, then that's an area that increases the risk of what we're doing more as well.
Well, I think it's a fantastic industry. The diversity of work you get, engineering, accountancy, all of the mainstream stuff is in our industry. The challenge with our environment in the middle of the North Sea, trying to operate. But I would really like to thank the companies that are taking graduates up through the system and trying to educate and develop the guys of the future that will be take care of our industry here. So thanks very much. I'll wrap this session up. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, James. Thank you, Bronson. Some really good content there. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Sam.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to the next section, industry news. New partnership being launched recently between Elemental Energies and Archer, the well company. So let's get these guys on.
Hi, Sandy.
Your microphone's working, Mike. That's brilliant. Very good, Mike Adams. You want to introduce yourself, Mike?
Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks, Andy. For those who don't know, Elemental Energies is a technical partner focused on subsurface wells and facilities engineering with a long track record in well project management. For us, collaboration and partnership is absolutely key, especially when looking at areas of the industry such as P&A. And yes, for us, this partnership it's a long coming relationship that we've been working together for many years. So it's very exciting to have launched formally the joint venture.
Excellent, Mike. Stephen Alancani, good to see you again.
Hey, Sandy, it's good to
introduce
see
yourself.
Certainly. So I'm fresh to Archer, actually. I joined 6 months ago, and the last session was very interesting because I've lived overseas for, again, 10 years, worked overseas for 15, and some of the comments were very, very apt. Obviously, Archer is a very interesting company. It's a very humble company, which sometimes doesn't project the correct message. So Archer, prior to Elemental, had foundational capability in facility and structural engineering, pre-work, rig integration. So it was an EPCIC contractor in the decom space. Elemental's capability, capacity, and international experience and exposure now gives full subsurface engineering accountability, backlog within contracts to expand into, and capability to now go into the international basins. So very exciting addition to the company, and it's rare. So if we look at the construction sector, many EPC contractors in place that plug things together, but they don't necessarily have accountability, the ownership of the assets they deploy. Coming to the decom space, many EPC contractors and EPCMs that don't necessarily own asset and have accountability in the execution, but they'll plug it together. So what you get with Archer and Elemental is an EPC contractor that owns the execution, that's vested in the execution, and has the internal capability, asset base, service execution, and track record to validate its credentials. So it's a very interesting concept.
Excellent. Thanks, Stephen. And Ian Farrow, your job is joint venture manager, so you have to stitch two companies together, find the opportunities and make it work. So, maybe a little introduction from yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. Good to see you, Sandy. Yeah, Ian Farrow. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I spent most of my career in wells, and I was I started with Archer over a year ago, P&A manager, and then this joint venture, as Mike said, launched the end of last year. So my responsibility, as you said there, is to take all the things Steve said, take the well expertise, project management from the Elemental side, and the rigs, well services, engineering capability from Archer's side, and deliver to the industry an integrated project delivery. So, yeah, certainly an exciting opportunity.
So Mike, you're CEO of Elemental Energies. You've been working alongside Archer for a number of years. Tell us where you see the opportunities in this joint venture in the UK market and the international market.
Yeah, I think for us, when we look at P&A, so many of the opportunities come around, integrating workflows, early engagement, and touching a little bit on what Nick was saying in the previous session. It's a holistic view for cost reduction in P&A, and a lot of that comes from engineering, design, and how do we make those things work together. I think for us, collaboration is very important, but it's very difficult to achieve in practice. And really the best way to do it is to have properly integrated teams. That takes a lot of time, a lot of money. And yeah, I mean, to be able to put that collaboration together in a long-term kind of permanent relationship, I think is quite unique. And for us, it's going to be a massive driver in efficiency and cost reduction for P&A. So when we look at those big basins for us, big, mature basins with lots of P&A opportunities, that's where both companies have been building our own footprint and presence, and investing over the past 5-10 years. So we see opportunities, across the North Sea, both sides, in the Gulf of Mexico. I'm dialing in from Houston today, and across, Asia, Australia as well. So to us, collaboration is about commitment, investment in each other, and then being able to bring that kind of surety and confidence to clients that no matter where you are in those, mature markets, we can come together with our teams.
So I know I read you're working with Promethean on some wells that have I think the term is boomerang back to original operators, which is a fantastic opportunity for you. Is the UK market ready to give away control to a company in a joint venture like yours?
Control is a really interesting concept, and I think what we do not want to do is dictate to operators, how to do their decommissioning. We can give confidence and give options how we can pull these campaigns together, and it varies so much from operator to operator and region to region. Just the regulatory impacts on these regions totally changes the way some of these campaigns have to be put together. We're here to support, and we can manage that control in a range of different ways. Management of the well stock is absolutely critical. And I think one of the things that we really work hard to try and give confidence to clients in is our ability to manage that. And we've done it for hundreds of wells around the world, that we've been able to successfully manage those risks and manage the delivery of well campaigns. But again, it's for us and the operator together to come up with that appropriate level of control for their campaigns. And it does, if you look at campaigns in the UK versus Norway versus the US, very, very different considerations on all sides.
And Stephen, from your experience, fast and furious well decommissioning in the Gulf of Thailand, I think some, a decent volume of well decom in the Middle East, and now I see you're touring the world, kind of given what SBE talks on decom mission repurposing wells. So, what do you see? What insights can you bring to people here about what this JV can deliver?
So the JV is massively powerful because it's the only enterprise and sector I see that actually has skin in the game. So it's a company that can engineer, plan, deconstruct, install, and then execute as a single entity. So you get the continuity, which you get enhanced service quality, you get minimized thinking time on MPT, which is generally the cardinal sin in decom. If you look at how do you apply that to sector, so if we look to the Middle East basins, you don't decommission a well in the Middle East as its end of life. You decommission as an OPEX reduction or a CAPEX reduction, i.e. you're putting a new polymer flood, steam flood, or water flood into a new field development. Wells within a target radius are seen as risk on thermal loss and actual hydrocarbon evacuation, and then you decommission them. Now we see those contracts come into market as lump sum turnkey, and the JV fits perfectly into that scenario because it's got the capability, capacity, and competence to take a scope of that size. We move into the adjunct basins in Asia. Significant skill shortage. If you look in the Australia basins up into Southeast Asia, into Central Asia, significant skill shortage in the management of operations. And what we've seen there, certainly over the last 7 to 8 years, is on the operator side, there's a massive skills gap. So the campaigns would be frugal, they'd be conservative, there'd be small AFEs, which you couldn't develop any of the facets that you develop through a JV, i.e. continuity of learning, continuity of service. You're running warm people, i.e. you've fully broken off learning curve. So you got all those benefits immediately through the joint venture. I see massive application for it. And to touch on the Australia comments from the earlier session, the Australian markets, the procurement of decommission there is very interesting. It's generally commoditized in a well construction guise. Now, as we all know, if you commoditize your procurement and you rock up to the well site, as soon as you start to get turbulence in the well bores, as soon as you start to get online thinking time via MPT, your economics are smashed. Your project is then significantly over budget, and there's now time pressure. So you exacerbate human performance factors. So the JV eliminates that because it brings you the exportation of skills and expertise, workflows and processes, and digitized lessons learned. So you're plug and play to some degree. You still have familiarization to local area, custom regulation, and asset environment, but your well operations are plug and play. And that's a massive quantifiable benefit.
Yeah, just if you don't mind, Sandy, just to further on Stephen's points, the people, access to people and lessons learned is extremely important. But we also need to look at the process of P&A and how we can effectively deliver that. Now, you talked about control, we work through gated processes. But I think what the JV also can offer, as well as the people asset surety, is just the ability to bring those lessons learned and the teams you would usually engage at the end of the process into our project definition. So sometimes, I would say I've been guilty in the past of trying to deliver a perfect process, but what we're trying to deliver is efficient, safe P&A. So we can bring our lessons learned from other projects, but also we shortcut what we would usually progress through a select level process to try and focus our technical teams on effective P&A, contingency 1, 2, 3, the things that can have a real tangible effect on the performance. So NPT reduction, effective contingencies, as opposed to, sometimes really laboring through a supply chain process. So yeah, it's I've covered off the point.
So I was going to ask then, on the projects you're involved in just now, are you seeing? Can you tell the audience any tangible cost reductions or performance improvements that you've actually seen, to give some examples?
Yeah, so I think in previous work and in projects we're actually involved in now, there's situations where the operator has decided on an end of life, a COP date that's selected and defined. Now, they would ordinarily go through the P&A process in which they would take, for the DCE creation, a very high level view of their well stock, and they would initially put their plans out on a curve, and then you would then define that over time, and then eventually you'd be ready, right? So by engaging the wider team earlier, we're able to develop new suites of tooling and new P&A units. So where you say, okay, ComOps, combined operations, would be useful here, or simultaneous operations would be useful here, so we can take two things at one. Your mind generally goes to an intervention, but we can actually develop pooling units to further that and have them done in time, because they are discussed and brought through the process at the very start of the project conception, not tendered for at the end. So we have tangible projects in which Archer have developed pooling units and taken various tools and created multi-trip tools such that we can save numerous days on each well. Therefore, production is increased because they delay the start of the P&A project, and that's one that we're engaged in right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I would just, and picking up on some of the comments as well, just around kind of talent and things like that. I mean, for us, it's about getting those minds together as early as possible, having them in the same room, and being able to drive some of these conversations, and then which then feeds into, can we actually develop something in time? If we get people together early, it opens that up for us. And I think having having a joint venture where you have that dedicated team, they're doing nothing but talking to each other and developing those kind of concepts together. But it is about time and early engagement for sure.
And Mike, does your model take on risk?
I think that's a really important point, is that model-wise, we are not selling a fixed model. It is, we hammer this home, time and time again. Our job is to bring solutions and flexibility and confidence and surety and confidence in things like control of how these campaigns can be delivered. I think it's a mistake for us to kind of go to the market and say, we're selling something. This is what it is, and look how great it is. It is so different from client to client, basin to basin, that if we're looking, like Stephen's touching on, if we're looking at projects in Australia and the Gulf of Mexico and in Brazil and Norway and the UK, we have to be conscious of the differences that are at play. And even, Ian touching there on a project where there's a COP that's fixed is very different from other projects or some of the kind of concepts Steve's touching on, sorry. So yes, I mean, we obviously have to be totally open-minded with how best to take these projects forward. And yeah, there are many creative ways that we can manage risk, both commercially and technically with our clients.
Stephen, you're new into Archer. You've been global for a long time. Anything to add to that? And I would kind of take it back to UK and what you're seeing overseas. What are the learnings for UKCS here?
So I think I've come back into the UK basin after a while away, and the significant constraint in the way we execute and operate facilities. So we're looking at rig up times that are 4x what we'd see international. We're looking at integration costs that are 10x what we'd see internationally. So we're looking at Malaysia delivering dual case and section mill in 2018 flawlessly in hydraulic workover because the process innovations there in the local supply chain. Yet in the North Sea sector, we struggle to do that present day. So there's a massive skills lag, I think. And this touches on the earlier session where Bronson mentioned that we can learn from the international basins. I think that the process innovation has been there for 15 years, certainly Southeast Asia. Australia's lagging also. It's slowly starting to develop in the subsea space. I think that the way we execute, the way we manage logistics, and the way that we apply conservatism as if decommissioning was well construction has a massive cost impact. We're not building the house at this point. We're not pointing, finishing, French polishing. We're going to have to pragmatically and risk assess to LARP how we decommission, and that's a very, very different mindset. And that's the one theme that I've seen. We're executing EPCIC just now in the basin. The integration it's exceptionally complex. It's exceptionally expensive, and when you get into operations, the well bores. So, okay, they're deeper, slightly larger build and drop sections, but generally the wellbores don't have the complexity that warrants the investment into reactivation. So yeah, I think mindset shift, cultural shift, and how as a service sector we enable that certainly is key if we're going to get an economic balance in the basin.
Yeah, that's some very key points there. We're kind of coming up to the end of the show. Ian, as joint venture manager, right? What's your biggest challenge, and what's your biggest win to date in this new venture?
That's good. Lots of challenges. They're all good challenges. I think fun challenges. Lots of challenges. They're all it's challenges that are faced across the board. I mean, I would say that because it's a long established relationship between Archer and Elemental has years of experience, lots and lots of wells into the belt. Archer obviously has been in the space for a long, long time. I think all the expertise is there. So the challenge, and it's not so much a challenge, but the exercise that we have to go through is just ensuring that when we talk about early integration, that we make sure that the whole machine inside Archer and Elemental is engaged at the early stages. So it's just about, we bring the teams together and we talk, but building out that process. And then I would say the next challenge, and you touched on it before in terms of operators handing over control, is actually the pitch to the operator, because every operator wants to do something different. In the UK, risk-based, risk attitude kind of drives what they wish to hand over. and what they want supported with. And then internationally, slightly different, but it's always the same. It's we can support under different models, but it's trying to just demonstrate the capacity that we have, build the tools. So yeah, I mean, it is a very exciting opportunity. I think the market has wanted this for a while. We've talked about the UK market and the supply chain. We need to build a strong supply chain, keep them here. I think we are almost over the hurdle now. The P&A in the UK will come. I think the biggest win is probably putting this model into international customers and then getting engaged in tenders. So that's been really good.
Excellent.
So yeah, no, it's
good. Well,
going well.
Thanks very much. So, I'll wrap up, but I'd like to just say thanks very much to Mike, Stephen and Ian for a hugely insightful story about, your new joint venture, and wish you best of luck in that going forward. Thank you.
Thanks.
So let me just wrap up with a few thank yous to everybody. So thanks to OGV Energy for hosting and enabling, a top quality conversation with some great people. To all the guest speakers from 360 Energy, OEUK, Wellvene, Elemental Energies, Archer and WellSafe Solutions. And to you, the audience, I hope you found it insightful. I hope you learned from it, and I hope you get the opportunity to share this far and wide. So from me, thank you very much and have a safe and productive day. Goodbye.